This is Archbishop Joseph Kurtz, and I'm happy to invite you to view a special program during this month of September, which is Marriage and Family Month. This program itself is a presentation that was given within the Archdiocese by me on the topic of the new pastoral letter on marriage entitled Marriage, Love and Life in the Divine Plan. I hope you enjoy viewing this presentation. Brian, thank you. Good morning, everybody. I have this microphone. I have a microphone here that's on, and I also have a microphone for the TV cameras. Is everything on that's supposed to be on? Well, again, it's a great privilege to be with all of you today, and it's a privilege also to welcome, and I know Brian will say this more formally, but Dr. Scott Stanley. And Scott and I were on a program together, I guess that was in early November, up in Columbus, Ohio. We had, about 670 priests from all over Ohio, and he and I have become friends, and I'm so glad that you agreed to come and be with us and speak to us a little later. Thank you for that. I'm also appreciative of the opportunity to speak with all of you today. I know that there are three people who introduced themselves and reminded me that I had met them in Evansville, Indiana, because there was a presentation just about a month ago in the Diocese of Evansville, and want to welcome you as well as anyone else who is beyond our archdiocesan family. Now, in the event that there's anything that I say that you think, well, gee, I wouldn't mind hearing that again. Are any of you familiar with The Word Among Us? Well, this June edition of The Word Among Us, which is a booklet that has daily meditations, and I think it's used in parishes. This particular edition for next month is, I think, coming to your parish soon if you get it. And it is on the topic of marriage. There is an article that I wrote entitled The Blessings and Challenges of Marriage. And if you read this and you listen to what I'm saying, you're going to say, well, they kind of resemble each other. So I wanted to give, the Archdiocese nor I get any money or anything for this, but it's a good opportunity to promote the Word. So I mention that to you before I get started, The Word Among Us. Now, how many of you here have never heard me tell the story of my Aunt Mary and her Easter gift? Just raise your hand. Okay, there's not a hand gone up. Okay. Now, however, I have confidence because this is being taped. And so I know that there is someone. There's someone somewhere in our archdiocese that have not heard this story. So Easter was coming, and I wanted to get a gift for my Aunt Mary. I got her an extremely expensive parrot that could speak a few languages, and I couldn't wait to call her on Easter morning. And I called her up and I says, Aunt Mary, Happy Easter. Oh, she said, Happy Easter. I says, did my gift arrive? Oh, she said, it arrived yesterday at noon. I said, well, did you open it? She said, I opened it right up. I said, well, did you like it? And she said, it was delicious. And I said, Aunt Mary, that gift, that was a parrot that could speak 4 languages. And she said, it should have said something. Now, I love that little story because I think in many ways, let's say 5 years ago, beginning really at the bishop's November meeting of '04, so it's 6 years ago this November, there was a decision made to move forward on a pastoral initiative on marriage. I'll be talking a little bit about that pastoral initiative in a minute, but I'm going to mention just, and it's within it, 5 points for this particular talk. The first point is about a conviction that's in my heart, and I hope will be in your heart. The second will be the urgency of having a day like today. The third will be what it means to be equipped, to have a resolve and to be equipped. And I'll talk in that about the pastoral letter itself. The fourth will be what I would consider 5 practical things that would make for a diocesan-friendly, a marriage-friendly diocese, or in your case, many of you working on a parish level, a marriage-friendly parish. And then the fifth is a reminder to me, and I hope to you, of who's in charge of this plan anyway. So let's go through these 5 points, and when I finish the 5 points, I will have finished this talk. So first of all, a conviction. It was last summer that I first saw this book entitled Souls in Transition. It's a book that's written by Christian Smith with the help of Patricia Snell, and it's entitled or subtitled The Religious and Spiritual Lives of Emerging Adults. It's talking about young adults. And I won't get into all of the specifics of it, but Christian Smith has been for the last 8 or 9 years at the University of Notre Dame working on attitudes of emerging adults, those he considers from age, let's say, 18 to 24. And in that process, he has uncovered in this book what he calls myths, things that kind of we just presume are true, but he finds does not have a basis in the interviews he's doing with young adults. And one of the myths, one of the things he says he has not found to be true, is that young adults don't care about the opinion of their parents. He said that just has not been found to be true. He's not suggesting that young adults tell their parents this, but he is saying that there is a great opportunity for parents, for priests and bishops, parish leaders, people who in some ways for young adults are, I'll call parent substitutes. And so we gather, and I gather today with you, saying that there is a great conviction in my heart that we can make a difference in the quality and shape of marriage and family, not only within our church, but really within our culture, within our society. And I'm also saying that if you don't begin at least with some conviction on that level, what's going to follow won't make much sense to you. You all have heard the idea of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You tell yourself that something just won't work. And guess what? Repeat it enough, it won't work. If we don't bring a conviction that we can make a difference, and in fact that people of all ages, but most especially young people, want our assistance, then we're probably not going to make much sense about what's going to follow. Now, let me tell you why I think we need to make this conviction. And part of it, by the way, I must say this too, I meant to mention it. In 2009, this was July last year, Time magazine had a cover story called Unfaithfully Yours by Caitlin Flanagan. I don't think I could have written a better article on what we should be about in developing culture in our society. This was not one of the religious magazines in the country. This was Time magazine, and it was the cover story called Unfaithfully Yours, talking about that we are on a brink of new things that can happen within our culture. So again, enough said about that, that need for us to begin with a certain conviction. Why do we need the conviction? Well, when the bishops gathered in 2004, what got everybody's attention was the lack or the drop-off in the number of people turning to the church for sacramental marriage. The drop-off from the mid-'80s to the mid-2000s it is, on the average, about 40%. Some dioceses higher, but about 40%. Now, some of that may be attributed to differences in numbers of marrying age people, but not that much. That was the first thing that got everybody's attention. Then we looked a little deeper. We looked at what social scientists are saying, and you know, children born in 1965 without the benefit of a mother and a father present in their lives was about 5%. It's about 1 in every 20. Do you know what it is in 2009? It's 40%. From 5% to 40%. Cohabitation, those couples who begin to live in a relationship as if married, but without the public commitment. Cohabitation, back in 1970, it was about 500,000, about 500,000, which itself is a lot. In 2007, 5 million. And I gave this talk a month ago, and somebody said, well, in 2009, it's 7 million. And so over 10 times as many people are living as if married, but without the public acknowledgement and commitment. We'll hear from Dr. Stanley a little bit about that. Now, as alarming as that was, the thing that I think hit me most was what I would call a surface view of commitment in marriage. We did some focus groups. We did some in Cincinnati. We did some in Steubenville, Ohio. And one of the things that we found among Catholic young people is that although they admire the sacrificial love of Jesus Christ, the theme that came through so much is a great fear of being hurt with a commitment. Someone when I mentioned this at a gathering of our Archdiocesan Pastoral Council, one young father came up to me a couple of months ago, and he said, you know, my daughter is in 7th grade. And she said to me at dinner last night, she says, Dad, I have 500 friends. He says, 500 friends, 7th grade. He says, I didn't even know 500 people when I was in 7th grade. How could you possibly have 500 friends? She said, Facebook. Now, I guess there's a certain good news. I'll let the parents to figure out the best way for young people to get engaged and involved in the internet and at what age and what time. That's not my topic today. But I guess there is something of a blessing in being able to know people virtually from all over the world so instantly. But what happens to the use of the word friend when we begin to say, I'm in 7th grade and I have 500 of them? And in fact, I have a button and I can press, it's called delete. And I can press that button and I can have 499 in an instant. It's the erosion, if you will, of the depth of the use of the word friend. One of the reasons I try in confirmation homilies to speak about this is precisely because I think it's a tragic development within our culture right now of the erosion of a sense of friendship into what we might call an occasion of mutual self-satisfaction. And as long and adult relationships become occasions for mutual self-satisfaction. And as soon as there is no longer mutuality, and as soon as there's no longer satisfaction, we have some form of a delete button. That's the biggest challenge, I think, with regard to what we're about as we look at our culture in promoting marriage. Now, the resolve. Well, I was ordained in 1972, and if someone came up to me, in fact, I remember they did, and they said, Father, what do you think about the stability of the Berlin Wall? I'd say, I've not been there, but I've seen pictures of the Berlin Wall. That thing is solid. There is no moving the Berlin Wall. I would say that's here to stay. You know, last year we celebrated the 20th anniversary of the bringing down of the Berlin Wall. I was just coming over here listening to one of my books on tapes from the public library, and by coincidence, sheer coincidence, it mentioned that the Ode for Joy was being played as that Berlin Wall was being brought down. Well, there were people who had a conviction that they could not shape or change culture, that the Berlin Wall was there to stay. I've been very much involved in the pro-life movement, as many of you know, and I know that just 15 years ago, there were many people who were looking at the number who listed themselves as being pro-choice, as being well over 55%, and those who characterized themselves in Gallup polls and et cetera as pro-life as being 39 going down to 35%. And most people, including myself, would say, you know, that's a trend. There's no stopping. This is like a cultural trend, like a steamroller. It's just moving in that direction. There's nothing I can do about it. And then I think, my gosh, just last year, the Gallup poll had people, they called them older people. They were people my age, so I will not call them older people. But at any rate, people who were over 60, now more than 50% list themselves as being pro-life. And as you get to the younger groups, it goes even higher. Can cultures shift and change? Of course they can. Can we be not only people who receive and live within a culture and be affected by it, because surely each one of us is, but can we help shape a culture? And I believe we can, and I believe the Pastoral Initiative on Marriage is exactly that. And it's within this context then, and I'll talk now about being equipped, that the bishop's initiative, it was not called a pastoral letter in 2004 when we began it. It was called a pastoral initiative. And precisely because what do you do with pastoral letters? You receive them in the mail, you put them carefully on a shelf, and you forget they've ever existed. That's what the majority of people. An initiative means that there's something in there for every one of us. We might all not do the same thing, but an initiative has opportunities that are far-reaching. What we're about today is the pastoral initiative on marriage. Now, I think a foundation for this initiative is the pastoral letter that was passed by the bishops in 2009, this past November, and it's entitled Marriage, Love and Life in the Divine Plan. Every word is important. It's about love and life. It's not simply mutually agreed upon love, but it's a love that's open to life, the life of the people you're loving, and the life of the new children, new births. And it is not about my plan or your plan as much as it is about uncovering the divine plan. This book, now, in addition to that, in Spanish and in English at this point, I think Spanish and English are the only two languages it now is in, although that doesn't mean that there might not be others. There is, and this is tempting, there's an abridged pamphlet. Now, if I were approaching it, I'd say 50 pages, one pamphlet. This kind of looks attractive. Now, here's the way I would look at it. If somebody tries to sell you just the pamphlet, I don't mind if you buy it, but say, no, I want to read the whole document. because the pamphlet is a good summary, but it will not give you the richness of the full document. And I know that Sal has told me that there's information for any of you who don't know how to get a copy of the document. It is also available free of charge that you can download on the bishop's site. But I do believe that it may be helpful in parishes for you to have copies of the document itself. I know I arranged for one to go to each of our priests at least some time ago. But also the summary pamphlet, 8 panels, is available also in English and in Spanish. Now let me mention the 7 themes. We're working right now at USCCB on a study guide. And it won't be exactly these 7 themes, but they're very close to it. But I'm going to mention the 7 themes that are within this pastoral letter. It's 50 pages, so I can't give you everything. First of all, that marriage is not simply a private affair. Of course it's deeply personal, of course, but never solely private. It involves not only 2 adults, it also involves their children, God willing. It involves our family of the church and of society. That's so important as we move forward. I use the article in Word Among Us. I quote what Barbara DeFoy Whitehead, who's a wonderful researcher. She was with the Rutgers Marriage Project. I don't think she's with them anymore, but she's written some very good things. And she's the one who talks about the desire for a soulmate. You know how people say they want to meet their soulmates, even on beer commercials now. And the soulmate, she says, everybody can say that indeed they do have a soulmate. But that soulmate is usually discovered at the end of a marriage, not at the beginning. I thought that's very interesting. That's in the article. So the first is this connection with it not being simply a private affair. Certainly, the second question, which relates to that, is that marriage is a blessing that is a received truth from God, built within nature itself. So one way we've often said it is, whereas because it's public, both the state and the church have always regulated in some fashion marriage. Anything that's important to society will always be regulated. We've never said that we create or change definitions. And so the second very important part is that we can regulate marriage either by state law or church canon law, but the actual definition of marriage is a received truth from God, and we talk about that. Thirdly, and part of that is the complementarity, the need for us to be able to understand the unique difference between a man and a woman. And this is one of the most challenging aspects to our culture now. When people, young people especially, are asked about the difference between man and woman, they immediately go back to what I would call stereotypes, which themselves are not true. We should be grateful that we have moved away from stereotypes that limit the roles of men and women. However, the challenge for us now is to be able to uncover the unique role of man and woman, and we're working with the Defense of Marriage on videos that I hope will be teaching videos that will continue to improve and be made available as this year is gone. That's the third one. The fourth one is to address the disconnect between love and life. I was watching a program, I don't know if it was on Oprah or it was something like that. I don't spend all afternoons watching these programs, but every once in a while I'll see a program. And it was a woman being interviewed, and she said, well, I'm going to marry this man, but I don't think I want him to be the father of my children. No, this was true. And I thought, wow. And in a sense, I watched the reaction of the audience, and no one minded that. And so there is this separation between who someone will marry and whether someone will bear children. And that separation, we can hear about later, is having great difficulties and challenges within our culture. So this document talks about that. How different it is when we did the focus groups and we asked people, what is the greatest joy in their marriages? And the most common answer was their greatest source of joy was watching their children grow. I thought that was interesting, watching their children grow. Now, the fifth is the sacrament, being a channel of grace. The whole first part of this document, the second part is on the sacramental nature of marriage. But the whole first part is on the natural blessing. Some people mistakenly say, well, the church should really only be concerned about what happens when someone receives the sacrament. Well, this document, 2/3 of it doesn't talk about the sacrament. It talks about the natural blessing for all people, the importance for all of creation and all of our society. But the fifth one that I'd mentioned will be the sacramental nature of marriage, and we do talk about marriage as being a channel of Christ's grace. The sixth talks about spirituality, and there's a beautiful section, I believe, talking about marriage and the virtues of gratitude and generosity, among others that are listed. And that is worth, I believe, your reading. And then seventh and finally, we talk about the challenges. There are 4 specific challenges that we mention in today's age that go right to the very core of marriage itself. The first one I mentioned earlier is contraception, which goes, is cohabitation, which goes against the very public nature of marriage. The second is contraception, which goes against the bond between love and life, and very ill understood within our culture. The third is the prevalence of divorce. And the fourth is the challenge to the traditional definition of marriage as of one man and one woman. We go through each of those 4 challenges within this particular document. Now let me mention, as we go through that I believe you have a handout. Sal, was that handout given already?
Which one?
The 2-page?
I'll do that.
Okay, if you don't mind. What Sal and Father Joe are distributing, and I thank them for that, is a 2-page handout that talks about some of the resources that are available on the bishop's website, the USCCB website, and these, I'll just mention a few of them that might be available and of interest to you within your parish setting. The first that I'll mention will be the pastoral letter itself, Love and Life in the Divine Plan. The second one that I mentioned to you that happened actually before this document was given out are the public service announcements that we did. What have you done for your marriage today? How many of you are familiar with the public service announcement or the website foryourmarriage.org? Is there anybody? Okay, a number. Okay, this is a great source of blessing for me to see this. I asked this question at one of our archdiocesan pastoral councils about a year ago, and I think we got 2 hands, the same 2 people, I think, who read Sal's book. It's hard work getting the word out, and if you're able to help us get the word out about the public service announcements, which are part of the website, foryourmarriage.org, what have you done for your marriage today? Also, what we did before publishing the pastoral letter was we put out monthly statements that are 2 sides of 1 page. They are now put together in what's called Making a Case for Marriage. I think they're ideal as handouts within a parish bulletin, or perhaps to give to young couples or instructional documents. They're on 9 different topics. The first one is on the question of cohabitation. They are done in very simple fashion. They state the question, what's the issue? They talk about what social scientists are saying today. They talk about the church teaching, and then they talk about some implications. All done on 2 sides of 1 page. And they are entitled Making the Case for Marriage. That's on the website also, and it's on the bottom of that page that is in your hand. We also have on the website some of the feedback we received from focus groups, as well as a special CARA study that we did on attitudes concerning and knowledge concerning marriage among Catholics. Now, what are we planning now and for the next year? Well, first of all, I alluded to it. We will have a study guide that will be available probably in the next 4 months that will assist people who are going through the pastoral letter on marriage. We also began in January Por tu Matrimonio, and it is a website that is specifically in Spanish and hopefully addresses people who are Latino, Latina in a manner that anticipates interests and aspects that would be helpful for them. One nice part about it is the Bishop's Committee on Marriage and Family did not develop this, but rather the Committee on Cultural Diversity on a national level developed this. We'd be interested in your feedback. It's Por tu Matrimonio. We also will be redesigning our website, and we'll have, hopefully in 2011, a new public service announcement campaign which will be directed to the connection between marriage and children, the blessing of children. So that is something that should be coming out in the next 12 months. There is another series of pamphlets that are being developed right now called Living Your Catholic Marriage. And we're hoping that those pamphlets that will be developed will be very hands-on and available to you and your parishioners as they come forward. What I would ask you to do is to familiarize yourself with the Bishop's website, USCCB, and in a special way to be able to receive the documents as they are made available. Now, all of those are meant to equip us, and in some ways you may be coming here saying, equip me, it's overwhelming me. But at any rate, part of here was to give you, if you would, a taste for what are the possibilities. Now, in my remaining 10 minutes, I'd like to turn to what it means to be a marriage-friendly parish. And I'd like to suggest 5 ways that, at least for me, are important in developing a marriage-friendly parish. First of all, to be able to preach and teach the gift of marriage. You know, in some ways, we were talking last evening at dinner, we have the great gift of teaching, but perhaps we have not honed in on the message. How is that teaching received and welcomed within our parish family and within families that each of whom has an individual and unique history? One of the things that we all know is that we need to be able to tell stories. We need to be able to hold up people who themselves are examples of the commitment in marriage. About 5 years ago, I received a letter, and some of you have heard me read this letter, and I thank you for your willingness to hear it again. It's a letter that came from a woman who was in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I was serving when I was serving in East Tennessee. But strangely enough, and interestingly enough, it came actually, she talked about her grandparents, who were 70 years married, this is 5 years ago, and who came from Cincinnati, Ohio. And here's what she said. Dear Bishop Kurtz, I'm a member of the St. Jude Parish in Chattanooga, and I have information that I want to share with you about a couple, not in your diocese, but that might be of interest to you in your role with the Conference of Catholic Bishops on Marriage and Family. My grandparents, Leo and Lucille Wenstrup, will celebrate their 70th anniversary on May 30 this year in Cincinnati, Ohio. They are truly an excellent example of what married life should be. In the last 70 years, they have lived through some wonderful events, such as the birth of their 5 children, 15 grandchildren, and 15 great-grandchildren. They have weathered some very difficult times, and through it all, they truly take care of one another. At 91 and 90, they still live alone together. I was able to visit them recently, and as always, what struck me is how wonderfully they take care of one another. I watched Graham wrap Grandpa's elbow in ice where he had a knot that is having trouble healing. I saw Grandpa count out her pills and be sure she took each one at the appropriate time. She ties his shoes for him and he helps her with dinner. They're truly a team in all aspects of life. They are also truly in love even after 70 years together. Consistently, when I've called them, I'll tell Grandpa to give Graham a kiss for me. And he'll say, "Oh, I'll enjoy that." I remember remarking that at their 50th anniversary, how they were still holding hands. Since they've been retired, Grandpa has tried to say 1 rosary for each of their 5 children every day, and Grandma also reads her missal every day without fail. They get communion as often as possible, even though they haven't been able to get to church recently because of health problems. As you can see, God has an active part in their life and marriage. Leo and Lucille Wenstrup serve as a tremendous example of married life. They are an inspiration to me, a true gift from God. We hear so much about statistics on divorce and how difficult marriage is. I thought this wonderful statistic of the success of marriage was worth sharing. Thank you for your interest, and may God bless your work. Yours truly, Melissa Mead. Well, gosh, I got that letter. And I thought, oh, well, it's wonderful. So I called a priest classmate of mine. I read him the letter as I read it to you, and I said, you know what, I'm going to write them a beautiful note. And he says, no, you're not. He says, you got to send them flowers. That cost me $45. But you know, it was the best $45 I spent that year. And I think if we are going to preach marriage, certainly I can talk for at least one bishop, I need to not only proclaim the stories of faithful married love, but I need to take an active interest in them. So preaching. Being part of preparation. When I was first ordained, and this is the second thing of what I would consider a marriage-friendly parish, was when I first was ordained that we just began to have what's called like-to-like ministry, a great gift, and many of you know this, married couples helping other married couples. Some of you, we were talking earlier about your involvement in that ministry. One of the mistakes we made, though, is to delegate. As I used to tell an associate pastor where I was a pastor, I said, listen, Paul, you can't delegate by abandonment. You can't delegate and then never want to see anything again. And so I would say one of the gifts of a marriage-friendly church is that every one of us, in our own way, takes an interest in the preparation of couples for marriage. We know it begins early in early catechesis. It begins actually in family life as a child grows. But most especially in that remote and proximate preparation right before someone gets married, there is a great opportunity for each of us to be creative and be part of that marriage preparation, even if it is only when we meet a couple to take an interest in them. So being part of the specific marriage preparation. Thirdly, being part of enrichment. Okay, I'll admit it. When we looked at the results of the focus groups, more than once, people who were already married said, when we look at ourselves with the church, we get the feeling that we're seen as completed projects. Once you get married, you're a completed project. Okay, and then I said, mea culpa, because when I was a pastor, I'd go through all of the preparation for a couple to get married, go through, and I loved weddings, but boy, did I hate those rehearsals. Oh, now you're going to say, well, you ought to be able to put up with things, but I don't know why, I just hated rehearsals. Now somebody said, well, they have this where someone other than the priest takes care of the rehearsal. I thought, why didn't I think of that? So at any rate, I would remember mostly on a Saturday finishing a wedding, and you kind of finish up everything. I go in, I sign my name to the book that says they're married. And I would say to whoever would listen, well, I'm glad that's done. I didn't mean that in a mean way, but I just meant, oh, it's finally completed. Well, I was wrong. And if there's one thing we have learned from all the focus groups over the last 4 years, is that's a mistake to say that the church is finished when a couple gets married. If anything, that's when our work is especially needing to begin to help sustain marriage. I have one example that I've used that I stumbled upon. The first parish I was in, 1988, little parish, St. Mary's in Catasauqua. None of you know where Catasauqua, Pennsylvania is, I know. But it was a little parish, and I loved it. It was my first parish as a pastor. And gosh, it was in a kind of a poorer area, but we had little homes, and so a lot of couples who just got married, they would be able to afford to rent this home. Well, we must have had 70 baptisms a year. I thought, oh my gosh, all these baptisms. So I thought we need to do something for baptismal preparation, which I still think, by the way, is the most underdeveloped pastoral moment in the life of our church. I still believe, and I've been saying this on a national level, I believe that we need to do, we are ripe for best practices in baptismal preparation. So I remember thinking, well, who are the 5 or 6 couples that I think, gee, if I needed to get ready for a baptism, who would I want to have help me? And I asked them, I said, would you be part of this team? And all 6 of them, all 6 couples said yes, that they would be happy to be part of the team. And I won't go through the specifics of what we did. I think we met 3 or 4 times with each of the people getting ready for the baptism of their child. But the thing that I watched was these 5 or 6 couples became friends. I didn't realize that would happen. That the enrichment came when couples who themselves were helping others began helping others together. And one of the things that we discovered with the focus groups was most people, when they talked about enrichment in the church, enrichment opportunities, whether they talked about RCIA or whatever they were, they said there are not very many direct ones, but we have had opportunities where, as a couple, we were valued in being able to work within our parish. That's, I think, a great opportunity, and it's the third one I'll mention. I have 2 more. Helping those who are hurting. Another devastating thing that happened in these focus groups, and we learned a lot, were couples said, well, I called the parish. All I really wanted was someone to listen a little bit, and I got an immediate referral I got a phone number, but it was a cold movement. And they said, speaking specifically of the priests, but it could be true of all of us in leadership, they said, we weren't at that point necessarily thinking the person who we called would have training in family therapy. That's not what we were looking. We were just looking for a listening ear. That's all we wanted. And we as a marriage-friendly church need to be called, I think, to do as best as we can, very intentionally, to give a listening ear when someone turns to us in need, even if it means eventually referring them to someone with greater skills than we have. But the listening ear. I also went, and I know Scott Stanley's been at this, the Smart Marriage Conventions, which is worth another talk. But at Smart Marriage, I was intrigued by a movement that's happening in the United States called marriage-friendly therapy. And it was a gentleman, William Doherty, who he was doing teaching videos on how he was helping in order to teach other therapists. And he began to discover that he was actually in his therapy promoting divorce. He didn't realize it. But as he was going through it, he thought, gee, I seem to be moving them. And he came up with a new theme called marriage-friendly therapy, in which he deliberately, couples need to make a decision. They can't be forced to stay together if there's difficulties with abuse or other such situations. But the thing that we are now discovering is that in some ways we may be making it too easy. We may be assuming too quickly. And that's why I love Retrovi. A very unused resource for hurting married couples, a retreat. I was really pleased to find that this last time in our archdiocese, 17 couples went through those involved with the Retrovi ministry were thrilled with it. I did a column on that about a year ago. But Retrovi, marriage-friendly therapy, any way that we can reach out to hurting couples, and we probably don't have to look very far today to do that. And then perhaps the most engaging and difficult one is what it means to be part of young adult ministry. If we are going to be a marriage-friendly church, then we need to be able to listen, and to listen to young adults, and to reach out and welcome young adults. And I know on an archdiocesan level, I know Carol and Sarah and others we're working in trying to come up. It's part of our strategic plan. But we'll need everybody's cooperation, and we'll want to work as a team, if you will, in doing just that. They are 5 very simple things that you could probably come up with an additional 5. But the most important thing is that you and I are thinking about being a marriage-friendly church. And what does it mean to create that setting? My final point. When all is said and done, who's in charge? You know, and maybe some of you have made this mistake. I hear these things, I get involved in a committee, and I think, oh my gosh, this is burdensome. And you almost, kind of your shoulders start to bend over. And then you realize that really in every aspect of our ministry, this is the Church of Jesus Christ. We're the messengers. Christ's grace is alive. And it is, when all is said and done, confident in His grace, not in our abilities, that will be the source of our greatest confidence. And so I'm very grateful to have had the chance to address you this morning on an issue of which I feel a great passion. And I'm privileged to be able to consider each other co-workers as we seek to build a marriage-friendly church. Thank you.
This Archdiocese Today is available on home video. To place your order, call 636-0296 extension 1230. Cost for either DVD or VHS is $14.95 plus $2 shipping and handling. Or you may email video@archlou.org.